Welcome, everybody, to what is not this week's episode of Ghostlight. This is a new kind of beast that we're trying out, and I asked my friend Josh Inners to join me. Josh, welcome. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. Always good to be back.
Absolutely. So I had this idea that I shot you via text of what if we did something kind of akin to the table work that we do at the beginning of a rehearsal process when we approach a scene or a play. As an entrepreneur, I don't often get to do this kind of work, and it is one of my favorite parts of the process. And I kind of wanted to test and see if other people might be interested. Tell me what you thought about this when I first brought it to you.
My initial thought was I've been working with a student who is a really good actor, but doesn't have a lot of Shakespeare experience. And I've been working through like basic table work, breaking down a monologue, verse, rhetoric, all that kind of stuff. And looking back on this, when you reached out, I was like, oh, it's been a long time since I've done this kind of work in depth, because I'd gotten to a point where so much of it was kind of kinesthetic and muscle memory that I found myself doing it when I got stuck. But kind of starting over from scratch it's fun to kind of look at some, and especially look at some text that I'm familiar with from a different perspective. Is fun. Yeah.
That's right, because I had suggested that we do this Brutus Cassius scene from Act 1, Scene 2 of Julius Caesar, because I had done it playing Cassius and you had done it playing Brutus, and then you suggested that we swap. Yeah. So we're gonna swap. I'm gonna do the Brutus role. You're gonna do the Cassius role, and that way we're familiar with the scene but unfamiliar with the vantage point, which I think will be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So we might do this in a couple of different parts. I might break this into, shorter, maybe 30, 45-minute podcast episodes. And we might do, just a very basic read through and discussion of the text. And then maybe we'll move on to some scansion. And maybe we'll do a part 3 that is to sort of like some structural breakdown. Who knows? But we'll see what happens and discover it as we go. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Is there anything that you think is important when actors first approach like the sit down first read of a play? What comes to mind for you?
I think for starters, knowing, especially with classical language, bridging the divide between our time and theirs, making sure you know what the language is, which is a lot. I think it's a lot less of a divide than we like to think it is, and like we like to pretend it is.
But like flagging anything that is like, oh, I don't know what that means, or that I don't understand what context that is.
Right. Yeah. Certainly.
I also think it's so important not to try to perform the first read as much as just get clarity.
Yeah.
And I know I fight that myself, and I see a lot of actors fight the need to like actually fully perform it. And it's always good to remind myself, like, we're just reading this for familiarity and to kind of get it into the space.
Yeah. I had a director I really like working with who would always say, first read through, he's like, you all have already been hired. You don't need to impress me or anyone else. We're going to get there. Like, we're going to get to the character work and all of that right now. Let's just hear what the words sound like.
Yeah. So that's important to remember as we go through this. Anything else come to mind for you?
No, I think acknowledging what the form and the structure is, that it's verse, and we're looking at that. And I find it's useful sometimes to, like, once we kind of just read through and hear the language, I find it useful to sometimes go back and really beat out the meter and like just hear what the form is, and then hear where the form breaks down, hear where it is necessary. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's just start by diving in and reading the scene.
Yeah. All right. Will you go see the order of the course?
Not I.
I pray you do.
I am not gamesome. I do lack some part of that quick spirit that is in Antony. Let me not hinder, Cassius, your desires. I'll leave you.
Brutus, I do observe you now of late. I have not from your eyes that gentleness and show of love as I was wont to have. You bear too stubborn and too strange a hand over your friend that loves you.
Cassius, be not deceived. If I have veiled my look, I turn the trouble of my countenance merely upon myself. Vexed I am of late with passions of some difference, conceptions only proper to myself, which give some soil, perhaps, to my behaviors. But let not therefore my good friends be grieved, among which number, Cassius, be you one, nor construe any further my neglect than that poor Brutus, with himself at war, forgets the shows of love to other men.
Then, Brutus, I have much mistook your passion, by means whereof this breast of mine hath buried thoughts of great value, worthy cogitations. Tell me, good Brutus, can you see your face?
No, Cassius, for the eye sees not itself, but by reflection, by some other things.
'Tis just. And it is very much lamented, Brutus, that you have no such mirrors as will turn your hidden worthiness into your eye, that you might see your shadow. I have heard where many of the best respect in Rome, except immortal Caesar, speaking of Brutus and groaning underneath this age's yoke, have wished that noble Brutus had his eyes.
Into what dangers would you lead me, Cassius? That you would have me seek into myself for that which is not in me.
Therefore, good Brutus, be prepared to hear. And since you know you cannot see yourself so well as by reflection, I, your glass, will modestly discover to yourself that of yourself which you yet know not of. And be not jealous on me, gentle Brutus. Were I a common laughter, or did use to stale with ordinary oaths my love to every new protester, if you know that I do fawn on men and hug them hard and after scandal them, or if you know that I profess myself in banqueting to all the rout, then hold me dangerous.
What means this shouting? I do fear the people choose Caesar for their king.
I do you fear it? And must I think you would not have it so?
I would not, Cassius, yet I love him well. But wherefore do you hold me here so long? What is it that you would impart to me? If it be aught toward the general good, set honor in one eye and death in the other, and I will look on both indifferently. For let the gods so speed me as I love the name of honor more than I fear death.
I know that virtue to be in you, Brutus, as well as I do know your outward favor. Well, honor is the subject of my story. I cannot tell what you and other men think of this life, but for my single self I had as lief not be as live to be in awe of such a thing as I myself. I was born free as Caesar, so were you. We both have fed as well, and we can both endure the winter's cold as well as he. For once upon a raw and gusty day, the troubled Tiber chafing with her shores, Caesar said to me, "Darest thou, Cassius, now leap in with me into this angry flood and swim to yonder point?" Upon the word, accoutred as I was, I plunged in and bade him follow. So indeed he did. The torrent roared, and we did buffet it with lusty sinews, throwing it aside and stemming it with hearts of controversy. But ere we could arrive the point proposed, Caesar cried, "Help me, Cassius, or I sink." I, as Aeneas, our great ancestor, did from the flames of Troy upon his shoulder the old Anchises bear, so from the waves of Tiber did I the tired Caesar. And this man is now become a god, and Cassius is a wretched creature and must bend his body if Caesar carelessly but nod on him. He had a fever when he was in Spain, and when the fit was on him I did mark how he did shake. 'tis true, this god did shake. His coward lips did from their colour fly, and that same eye whose bend doth awe the world did lose his lustre. I did hear him groan. Aye, and that tongue of his that bade the Romans mark him and write his speeches in their books. Alas, it cried, give me some drink, Titinius, as a sick girl. You gods, it doth amaze me, a man of such a feeble temper should so get the start of the majestic world and bear the palm alone.
Another general shout. I do believe that these applauses are for some new honors that are heaped on Caesar.
Why, man, he doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Men at some time are masters of their fates. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings. Brutus and Caesar. What should be in that Caesar? Why should that name be sounded more than yours? Write them together, yours is as fair a name. Sound them, it doth become the mouth as well. Weigh them, it is as heavy. Conjure with them, Brutus will start a spirit as soon as Caesar. Now in the names of all the gods at once, upon what meat doth this our Caesar feed that he is grown so great? Age, thou art shamed. Rome, thou hast lost the breed of noble bloods. When went there by an age since the great flood, but it was famed with more than just one... When went there by an age since the great flood, but it was famed with more than... haha. When went there by an age since the great flood, but it was famed with more than with one man? When could they say till now that talked of Rome, that her wide walks encompassed but one man? Now is it Rome indeed, and room enough when there is in it but one only man? Oh, you and I have heard our fathers say, there was a Brutus once that would have brooked the eternal devil to keep his state in Rome as easily as a king.
That you do love me, I am nothing jealous. What you would work me to, I have some aim. How I have thought of this, and of these times, I shall recount hereafter. For this present, I would not, so with love I might entreat you, be any further moved. What you have said I will consider. What you have to say I will with patience hear, and find a time both meet to hear and answer such high things. Till then, my noble friend, chew upon this. Brutus had rather be a villager than to repute himself a son of Rome under these hard conditions as this time is like to lay upon us.
I am glad that my weak words have struck but thus much show of fire from Brutus.
All right, cool. Does anything jump out at you?
I mean, yeah, a couple things, like listening to right at the beginning, just hearing kind of how the form of the text is informing some of, I think, potential acting choices, just those big empty feet that pop up. After that first, let me not hinder Cassius your desires, I'll leave you. There's like a big most of an empty line that I think is a great, and then there's another one that pops up that it's a great way to just kind of fill the tension of the scene.
Yeah.
I also heard it. It's funny. I remember this doing the show, but I heard it a lot differently reading as Cassius. Brutus bounces back and forth sometimes between when he says Cassius versus when he says Cassius. And it's interesting. It's like when your mother uses your full Christian name of like, you have to like sit up straight and listen. I thought that popped out like once or twice throughout.
Yeah, I was going through this earlier and also noticed the empty feet at different points. I didn't identify all of them, but I also noticed that 3-syllable Cassius versus the 2-syllable Cassius or Cassius. And yeah, I think there's some there on those changes, and some choices to be made. It does strike me reading this that, would you call this scene the inciting incident of Julius Caesar? I mean, we're early on in the play, and and this relationship and its arc is going to be kind of the majority of the play Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
And this is really where Cassius plants the seed that ends up driving the action of the rest of the play. Is that a fair evaluation?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, I think that's one of the weird things about this play, that it really should be called The Tragedy of Brutus and Cassius, because it's
Right.
in many ways it's about their friendship breaking down and falling apart, and kind of the inability of friends to listen to each other. So yeah, I'd say that's an accurate statement.
And do you happen to remember, like, how long ago was it that we were at battle or at war?
Oh, geez. You mean with the whole Pompey nonsense?
Yeah, and I guess was that maybe wasn't necessarily us, right?
Not Pompey though.
But Caesar and Antony for sure. It was Pompey's sons, I think.
Well,
Is the
I'm getting my Pompeys confused, because Pompey is going to be one of the major forces in following
Antony and
play.
Cleopatra?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I don't remember how long it's been since we've been at war. Well, and it's funny. That's one of the interesting things I think about this play in particular, that performing it and then kind of doing a little bit of like historical psychological digging into the characters, which isn't always the most useful, I think, with Shakespeare in particular. But for this, it really changed the way I thought about these guys. I really stopped thinking of them as freedom fighters and really began to think of them more as the culture.
Imperialists?
Yeah. In many ways, like Caesar, not to use a modern example too much, but like Caesar was in many ways the Bernie Sanders of his day. Not that he was this wonderful saint, but like he was pissing people off by giving so much to the people, and kind of playing with populism, and that he represented such a threat to their stranglehold, that I like thinking about Bruce in particular and Cassius. It was like, oh, I think of them now more as like spoiled little frat boys.
Right.
But again, I don't think that that's a particularly useful observation for the action of the play, because that's not the most playable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like to play devil's advocate, the other way to think about it is that they, were coming out of, they had reinvented the way that people could govern, right?
Uh-huh.
Like it had always been a single solitary ruler. And this was the first time in history there was a republic. I need to look that up to see if that's accurate, but it can't have been that. It can't have been like many other people who had done this kind of government before at this point in history, to my recollection.
Yeah.
And so,
well, and there's familial pride there. Cassius talks about it, that Brutus is what his great grandfather killed one of the early attempts to establish a monarchy in Rome, and returned power to the people. I think what I was getting at is that the whole power to the people thing is like, well, I mean, they're power to the landed wealthy gentry, not to the people, but it's still, it's better than tyranny, maybe.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, right, at that time, this was kind of avant-garde. This was a new kind of thought. And if one person was to get back in charge, it would be a step backward. And of course, I think underneath all of that, like what you're picking up on is that all the good stuff that the senators enjoy, and all the power that comes with, being a part of the ruling class, is also at threat. And so there may be a mixture of, as an idealist, Brutus, is working on sort of the common good, but there might be some underlying, maybe even unknown recognition that this would be bad for him for his wealth, for his power. And so then, as human beings, we justify whatever it is that helps keep us in that position of power and authority, right?
Yeah, and also, I mean, they're. I think it's easy to dismiss the idea of protecting the status quo, which is what they're trying to do, but it also represents a dire upset to your world, and that was one of all throughout Shakespeare's text and his plays, the force that upsets the status quo, that violates the order of the world, is always the threat that needs to be overcome. So Caesar does represent that threat to them.
Right. Right.
I had a director who would say that, like, no amount of historical or like psychological research will do you so much good in Shakespeare as just being off book for the first day of rehearsal, because it's all about the language. And I think especially with this play, like, while that's true about Roman history, it is interesting to look at like what this play is doing in Elizabethan history, and like the language that writers at the time are not allowed to use about monarchy and about kind of that age-old struggle in England between the king and the nobles and the landed gentry that is going to eventually bloom and blossom into the American Revolution and into Cromwell and all of that kind of stuff. I think it's interesting to look at that. I think is more useful for this play, the Elizabethan side of things, than the necessarily the Roman side of things. But to quote that old director, none of it does you so much good as just learning your lines for the first rehearsal.
Yes, and you can also get lost in the weeds a little bit in the historicalness and lack thereof in the text itself. It's like, okay, that can provide some useful context, and we can make some decisions. But at the end of the day, this is a play, and
playable?
Shakespeare is known for taking lots of liberties. And you're right, like writing for a very specific audience in mind. So yeah, I love that. And one thing I was thinking too is it is good to think about when he was writing it, what they would have already known and what they were aware of. And like when they bring up the Ides of March to that crowd, they already know what happens on the Ides of March. This is a part of the common understanding of these people. I mean, they know Caesar and they know what happens in the middle of March to Caesar.
Yeah.
And so that's also an interesting thing, right? Is just the collective conscious of the intended audience.
Well, and there's also an interesting, like, the cultural, I think, experience of who Brutus and Cassius are is very different from a modern American perspective, as they've kind of been held up as heroes, whereas at the kind of the closest literary kind of draws at the time is looking at Dante, and Brutus and Cassius are in the lowest pits of hell. Like, they are pure villains because of the violation that they do to their social order and their world. So that also, I think, would be floating in the minds of his audience, that it's interesting to see them viewed as protagonists. Of course, flawed protagonists who are going to fail.
Yeah.
But yeah.
This was one of those plays, when I was a much younger actor, I remember having a conversation with someone, I can't remember who, but somebody who was like, had maybe just played Hamlet or just worked on Hamlet. And I think it was Denise Hicks from Nashville Shakes, actually. And I think she was like, "Oh, how do you like playing the villain?" I was like, "Hamlet? It's Hamlet. It's not the villain." And he was like, "Well, he does a lot of bad things." And like, when you look at, he's the hero of that story, but he's the protagonist for sure. But is he really the good guy in the play? And, you can ask that same question of Henry V. And I think for me, reading the scene with you brought me back to when you did this with Tim Seiler at the American Shakespeare Center. And I saw that production. And I think when I watched that, I was like, oh, they're the bad guys. Mm-hmm. And I think I had the other opinion of them for a very long time. Like back when I did Cassius to Dylan Paul's Brutus, and Tim played Cassius. Tim Seiler played Cassius in a different sister production, same time frame. But but I think back then I thought that they were the heroes of the story. And then watching your production, I changed my mind.
Yeah, it's funny. I drew that kind of connection between Brutus, especially Brutus and Hamlet, a lot. That Brutus very much feels like a rough draft of Hamlet. He just doesn't
Mm,
get the time with the audience that Hamlet gets, but they eventually, like, they both break down when they take action. Like Hamlet, you talk about him being a villain, and like I 100% came to that same conclusion. There was a moment in running that show with you that I was like, Hamlet, I destroy an innocent family. Like whatever you think of Polonius, whatever his deal is, but certainly his children, I single-handedly destroy this family.
yeah.
And it happens when he impulsively goes to take action. And I feel Brutus is the same way. When he goes to take action, he refuses to listen to Cassius and
Yeah.
follow Cassius's good sound advice. It's just, that's an interesting, like, an interesting dichotomy of the thinker who is forced to be an action hero in some way, shape,
Hmm.
or form, and inevitably fails.
Yeah. And what came to mind for me was you saying that and how the roles get so reversed in that Cassius has to kind of lure him into this whole scheme, eventually does. And then Brutus is really the one who becomes the bull in the china shop. I mean, he just starts making these decisions a little bit unilaterally. And like you said, not listening to Cassius's sound advice. And then Cassius is the one kind of left picking up the pieces. And so that's kind of where we end up in that tent scene, that famous tent scene closer to the end of the play, um, where the relationship is really in shambles, and it's Cassius who's kind of talking down Brutus.
Yeah. It's interesting looking at this play now, kind of as we see, not to politicize it too much, but we see like the consequences of people who are very slick but have no
Hmm.
governance ability, and
Mm.
what happens societally when those people are at the helm. I feel very similar about these guys. Like, they're good. Like, they are in the right in many ways, but they just don't have the ability to make those crucial hard decisions. But
I feel like I saw this in Coriolanus too when we
uh-huh.
did it. You know those two characters. What are their names?
The
Can't
two like
remember, but the
tribunes who are running
the
around.
two the
Yeah.
two tribunes. Yeah, I mean that is very similar in this like political slickness. They're very aware of the machinations behind all this stuff, and they're
Mhm.
pulling strings by design. And they're very convinced that they're they're doing it for everybody. They're very convinced of their own goodness.
Yeah, their own self-righteousness.
Self righteousness is a
Yeah.
great term.
And
Um,
I find those conversations to be interesting and useful, and really only able to happen when you're working with actors that you trust and know each other. Because I always find in actors, sometimes, not always, but often find this impulse of like, I don't want to speak ill of my character. Whereas I always think it's so useful to like, what are my flaws? Where is the vase cracked? Because that's where the interesting story stuff is going to happen. And
mhm.
like, to break apart why these characters fail, I think is one of the most useful things actors can do.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, what do you think the relationship is between Brutus and Cassius? I mean, obviously, it seems like from the text that they have a good deal of history with
Yeah.
one another.
Yeah, they do have a lot of history. But I mean, for the sake of the scene, I think there's some reason that Brutus has not been completely open with Cassius recently. I think
Mhm.
he's a smart guy. He probably knows that something's up. But there's something in their relationship that has severed that drives Cassius to be like, "What's wrong? Why won't you look at me? Why won't you listen to me?" You know?
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's uh, like what my head goes to is that Brutus has been contemplating all of this stuff in his own head, which has made him withdraw. And maybe that's being misinterpreted. Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to speak for your character's interpretation, but um, that's I feel like what I'm picking up on from Brutus's language is the reassuring. He's like constantly reassuring him, we're good. Like, don't misunderstand me. I think, oh, and this brings up another important thing I think we needed to discuss, which is that there is a pressure cooker that Shakespeare builds into this scene with the offstage action.
Yeah.
It's like another character,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
And we just had there's two of the flourish and shout, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which he's then going to bring back in like the following scene where we're going to find out what was happening during this interchange.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is interesting. I think that their relationship, or at least what we see of Brutus and Cassius, their relationship, does kind of become the MO for their relationship throughout the play. It gets echoed certainly in the tent scene that there's something about the two of them that Cassius feels the ability to go, what the hell, man? Like,
Yeah.
you owe me something. You're not treating me in a way that I think I should be treated. He does it much more politically here than he does in the tent scene. And Brutus does do a lot of, I don't know, offsetting that, whatever that drive is that he sees in Cassius to like acquiesce and make sure he's okay. We see that echo, I think, in almost all of their relationship throughout the play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I think it is safe to say that I wouldn't call them best friends, but these are two people who work very closely with one another and have, I think, for years and years and years, and who have a very intense level of trust with one another.
Yeah.
And do you think that the love that they refer to, because they do throw that term a couple of times, but I wonder if it's more a citizen respect, you are my peer, like, or do you think it is more of the brother type of love?
I don't know. I think I would figure that out more on our feet as we were playing around with the language, because that brings up an interesting thought as I was looking through the text, and I kind of started doing some paraphrasing just because it's been a while since I did it, and I was kind of curious how it worked with the language. And one of the things I like about that kind of word for word paraphrase exercise is you begin to notice when the characters are repeating each other, and when I'm echoing things you say, and they really listen to each other. You're the one who starts this image of a mirror or of being able to look at my own countenance. And then two speeches later, Cassius goes back to it. And then they bounce back and forth the idea of love between them. And I think it's interesting to wonder, are they meaning the same thing? I think it's an interesting story if Cassius just wholeheartedly loves this man in whatever that means, and that maybe Brutus also does in his own way, in a different way. I think there's something, it's fun to explore something unrequited between the two of them. Not necessarily sexual, but maybe sexual. I don't know what it is, Well,
it's really interesting that you said that, because I immediately, when you said that like Cassius loves him, my immediate thing was like, yeah, but I love you too, man, but like, give me my space.
Yeah, exactly.
Is Brutus, right? Like, and that unrequited love thing, I think it does play into their relationship. And maybe there's also a level of Brutus's language often is a little pompous and holier than thou. And I do wonder if he thinks he's better than, most of these other senators, and he's smarter. He's more even keel. He's more of the stoic, right? He embodies that.
Well, I think so much of the core of Brutus is honor and the idea of honor and the performance of honor. But I think so much of the core of Cassius is love, because he comes back to that image. And then eventually, during their kind of ultimate confrontation in the tent scene, he lashes out with that. Brutus loves Caesar. He loves not Cassius. Like he can't get past this idea that Brutus maybe doesn't return. And whether that love is love, or whether it's respect and admiration, whether it's kind of someone who needs to feel seen by a peer in a way that is vulnerable. I don't know, but I think that is interesting looking at how often Cassius goes to the love well, whereas Brutus seems to be content to be at the honor well.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to keep in mind and continue to play with if we were to ever, get to do this thing together in the long run. I like both of those kind of starting points for these two guys.
Yeah.
And that's maybe one of the reasons why they have such a hard time getting on the same page, because they approach it from a totally different, I guess trying to think where I would locate honor physically. It might be lower to my center, and Cassius would be more all heart and love, and maybe that's where that fire exists.
Well, we're going to see Cassius bare his chest in the tent scene. He's going to say, here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.